all criminal defense attorneys in Clearwater, Florida. Bridget Domingos joins us in studio. We have Noah Pines, Michael, I'll make sure we get it. Noah Pines, Michael Bixon, and Michael Sterling. So I want to make sure I get them in the correct order that you're seeing them on the screen. Okay, great to have everyone here. Gentlemen, great to have you in studio. That's fine, but it's ladies first. You know that, right?
Absolutely.
So, Bridget, I'd like to begin with you and start with Florida, 6 jurors. Someone's been shot and killed, and we're going to have a jury of 6. Why?
You know, Vinny, that's a good question, but it's my understanding that because it's a manslaughter charge, they didn't have to do the full 12 jurors, which I think in some ways people feel is advantageous to both the defense as well as the prosecution, depending on who you're asking.
All right, well, gentlemen, what do you think? 6 jurors. This is, it's a Florida thing. We do it with 6 sometimes.
I definitely don't think it's advantageous to the defense.
Why is that?
Try to get 6 of your friends to agree on one place for lunch or 12. Which one's harder? It's always harder to get 12 people to agree, which means it's always harder for the state to convince them to, find somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I'd always want more jurors. I'll take a mistrial over a guilty verdict any day.
Yeah, I completely agree. When you're trying to get 6 people to agree to something, it's a lot easier to get in 12 to agree.
They're allowed to agree to not guilty, Michael Bixon. They have 2 choices here. It's not just guilty or hung trial. They can say not guilty.
Absolutely. But look, it's the state's job to persuade them, and you want the state to have to work that much harder to persuade that many more people. I'd rather have more jurors all day long, no doubt about it.
From the criminal defense perspective. Now, the other big issue that came up today is most of these jurors have seen the video in this case. Michael Sterling, I'll begin with you. They've seen the video. We've all seen the video. Does that have any impact here? Like the jurors say, yeah, I could put it aside, the ones who passed through. But can they put it aside, or does it even matter that they've seen this video?
I think jurors are going to tell the judge what he wants to hear. I think typically what happens is a judge says things like, can you be fair and impartial? Can you put this to the side if I instruct you to do so? And jurors are going to respond. It's going to be up to defense attorneys to make sure that if someone has a preconceived notion based on seeing that video, that they bring that out. And it's going to take some creative questioning during voir dire to make sure you bring that out. So it's going to be up to defense attorneys to do a very good job during voir dire, because that sort of general questioning, in my experience, it is a way for prosecutors and judges to rehabilitate jurors. But if you question them the right way and elicit the right responses, you can figure out which jurors are going to have a preconceived notion towards guilt.
Yeah, but this is an interesting piece of evidence in this case, because the defense attorneys are telling me that video it proves that he's not guilty.
Well, that's definitely arguable. And coming from the defense side, you're obviously going to argue that. But honestly, I think it does more harm than good. I think the defense is going to have to sort of catch up to where the video is in terms of where it puts the state versus them. So I think it does, sort of set them back a little bit. It makes their job a little bit harder.
Bridget, are you concerned that all these prospective jurors have seen the video from either side here?
I am, actually. I know that when the video and everything first aired, it was pretty much the biggest thing to happen here in Pinellas County for sure. And it was very divisive as to how people felt about that video. If you read the comments under like the Tampa Bay Times articles or any of the, news outlets here locally, literally you had there was a difference of opinion. You had half the people saying, he got what he deserved, and you had the other half saying, clearly this guy was the aggressor. How does he then get to kill someone and not get arrested? And so, it was very divisive, and I think that video is going to be potentially problematic, especially, it's my understanding, one of the rulings is that they now get to slow the video down during the trial, and I wonder what impact that's going to have on the jury as well.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about that video in depth when we come back, and the slow motion, but hearing that it's very divisive and the comments were split, sounds like a Noah Pines hung jury already. All right, our 13th juror question for you. Is race, we're going to talk about that tonight too as well, folks, don't forget. Is that the most important factor when picking a jury in this case? Go to Court TV's Facebook page or my Facebook page, Vinny Politan, Court TV. Let us know yes or no, but also leave a comment. Explain why you believe yes or no and respond to other folks' comments. Let's get that conversation going.
grainy and there's no sound, but this video captures exactly what happened. Marquise McLaughlin comes out from the convenience store and walks towards Michael Drejka. McLaughlin pushes him down, causing him to fall to the ground. Seconds later, Drejka draws a gun and fires.
Hello?
I need help now.
Okay. Where are you? Where are you? What?
I'm at a store. I just need help.
Okay.
Panic calls to 911 would follow. McLaughlin has been shot in the chest. He stumbles back into the store and collapses.
Someone just got shot, so we need to speed this up a little bit. Okay.
McLaughlin is rushed to the hospital. He dies a short time later. McLaughlin and his girlfriend had stopped at this convenience store to pick up a few items. She was waiting for him outside when Drejka confronted her for parking in a handicapped space.
I need justice. This is not right at all.
Michael Drejka doesn't think he did anything wrong. Police question him after the shooting.
Pushed nothing, tackled. I'm blindsided, dude. Okay. I'm on the ground hard.
So he shoved you pretty good?
No, from what it felt like is he come running at me.
Okay, like full force?
Dude, I haven't been hit like that since I was in my 20s.
Drejka demonstrates for police what he says happened.
Right? I'm on the ground like this.
Okay.
Drejka directs the deputy to stand at the distance he says was between him and McLaughlin.
As I come out like this, he's taking his step.
Okay. Taking a step?
Taking his steps towards me.
I thought kicks were coming.
Drejka says he believed McLaughlin was going to attack him again and fired a single shot in self-defense.
He felt, after being slammed to the ground, that the next thing was that he was going to be further attacked.
The sheriff says the law protects Drejka from being charged or arrested.
His statement that he believed that McLaughlin was going to come back at him, and he fired in a very short amount of time, a few seconds, 4 seconds probably, somewhere in that range. That is within the bookends of stand your ground.
Not justice! No peace!
That decision sparked a firestorm of outrage and protest. Footage of the incident went viral.
This video speaks for itself. Michael Drejka shot and killed Marquise McLaughlin outside this Clearwater convenience store.
This stems from an argument over a handicap spot.
Critics called for changes to Florida's controversial stand your ground law.
We need to put an end to this. Any kind of law that allows one man to kill another man, and the man that pulled the trigger don't even get fingerprinted, needs to stop. Something needs to be done.
The investigation was turned over to local prosecutors, while the sheriff continued to resist pressure to arrest Drejka.
I don't make the law, and I do not do what people want because of outrage.
24 days after the incident, prosecutors charged Drejka with manslaughter.
We're going to set a trial here.
He was arrested and is currently free on bond. Whether he stays free will be up to a jury.
I think the jury's going to look at this as the way we are looking at it. Political farce. Should never have been prosecuted.
And at the center of this entire case is the videotape, the surveillance videotape that shows everything. There's no sound on it, but it shows everything. It's a little bit grainy, but pretty clear when you're talking about who is doing what at what point of this entire incident. My think tank is back with me, and we're going to take a look now at the video together and show it to the folks at home as well. This is going to be, folks, the full video, so it does get graphic. So if you don't want to see it, please, you can leave the room or come back and join us in a few minutes. Right there, Michael Drejka pulled up in his SUV, and he spots Brittany's inside the car. That's where Marquise and Brittany had parked. Marquise is inside the store at this time, but he's circling back and forth right now. And I say this is the first part of the three parts of the confrontation, which becomes the verbal confrontation, which is initiated, from my perspective, by Michael Drejka. How does this play to a jury, the fact that everything is put into motion by the defendant?
Well, I mean, you could say everything's put into motion by the defendant, but somebody is parked in a handicapped spot that's not in a handicapped car.
Okay.
So he, obviously Drejka could get up there and say, look, I was telling them it's a handicapped spot, and she started yelling back at me. I was just asking her to move her car in case somebody who came in here.
So two ways to play that. Now, I want you to pay attention to, there's a car that just pulled up. You can see a gentleman sitting in that front seat with a blue shirt. Look at this woman with the pink top. She turns her head, and that tells me that the voices are so loud that she can hear them. The gentleman, I think that's Robert Castelli, will testify. He notices what's going on. He's got to get something in the store, but stops right here because of what he sees and hears. And again, he hesitates going inside the store because of what he's seeing and hearing. And to me, that tells me that things are getting pretty loud there.
I mean, and here's the thing to think about, Vinny. He's got a gun on what it looks like well, you can't see it, but he's got a gun on his right side. He's approached a woman who's by herself in a car with a child.
Two children, and here comes Marquise.
While he's got a gun on his side.
Now, this is the second part of the confrontation, and here's the third part. Shots fired.
And this contradicts Drejka's report to the police that he steps towards him when he stepped away from him.
Now, Marquise, as you see, goes back inside at that moment. Drejka is there. It looks like he's picking up the shell casings on the screen there. But Marquise goes back inside and ends up dying or collapsing in front of his 5-year-old son who was inside that store. All right, so that video.
Right. Well, Drejka gets to defend himself. There's no question. As soon as you're pushed by somebody else, somebody makes physical contact, the law in every state says you can defend yourself. The question, Vinny, is can you use deadly force, right? So if Drejka would have gotten up and punched the guy and beat him up, there's no case.
How about if he gets up and just points the gun at him?
Points the gun to hold him at bay, I think that's self-defense. The question is, do you get to pull the trigger? And if you look at Florida's self-defense law, it's the same as Georgia. You only get to use deadly force if there's a reasonable belief that you're doing it to prevent serious injury or death to yourself. And the problem is that he's on the ground, there's distance, there's no gun, right, in the victim's hand, and he's not stepping towards him, he's stepping back.
He's stepping back.
That's a big problem.
Bridget Domingos is down at the courthouse. Bridget, when you looked at that video, what do you see?
I saw a man killed in broad daylight when I looked at it. But naturally, with the sheriff coming in afterwards and kind of contradicting that, so to speak, to the citizens here of Pinellas anyway, I think that's what caused a lot of the confusion surrounding this case initially. But when I look at the video, Vinny, I literally see a man stepping back and I see him being shot in front of his future wife and children.
Vinny, I tell my clients all the time that sheriffs, police officers, agents, they don't know the law. They aren't lawyers. They haven't studied the law. They aren't certified. They don't have Juris Doctorates. They don't know the law. And so I remind my clients all of the time that the reason that you have protections and constitutional safeguards and the reason we go to court and the reason there are jurors is because police officers simply don't know the law. And I think the sheriff, he doesn't know
Sheriff's
the law.
a lawyer.
He still didn't know the law.
Yeah, no,
But generally speaking, sheriffs and police officers, they don't know the law the way that lawyers and judges know the law because they don't study it the way we study it.
Day to day inside courtrooms. Now, another big ruling by the judge is that a slow motion version of that video will be shown to the jury. So let's put that up. And Michael Bixon, from my perspective, this helps prosecutors. The defense did not want the slow motion in.
Absolutely not. I mean, because you see him take a step back, and by
let's watch it here. We're watching it in real time here as in slow motion. There, and you see Bridget is there too. So the shove, he's down and tumbles over. Marquise takes like 2 steps towards him after the shove. And then as he reaches to the side, now he takes 1 step back, 2 steps back, 2.5, and then the gun comes out and he's turning away at the same time. Prosecution experts are going to say that's about somewhere between 10 and 15 feet of distance there. What impact does the slow motion have on the jury?
I think the slow motion portion of this is excellent for the prosecution because it really highlights the fact that Marquise is not coming at him in an aggressive manner. Yeah, he does initiate the physical confrontation between the two, but immediately afterwards he steps back, not once but twice, making more distance between the two, not coming at Drejka, not threatening him. And even if he was, I mean, we have to look at it. At the end of the day, this is a push, this is a shove, right? And the Florida statute requires imminent death or great bodily harm, some kind of threat. This is a push. This doesn't get you there. This is so far away from that. I mean, and look, I completely agree with what Michael was saying earlier about, the sheriff's not knowing the law. And even if he is a lawyer, because it's such a misapplication of it to not charge him in the first place, based on this video.
Well, and he had this video, he had the interview as well, and the state's attorney had it, and they had a different interpretation. That's why they brought charges, I guess, right?
I mean, this is the perfect case for a jury to determine.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, you know, in Georgia, this guy would be charged with malice murder, felony murder, and he'd be facing a life sentence, at least in my, you know, in my practice, in my experience in the metro counties.
Is it fair to have a slow motion video in front of this jury?
Definitely not.
Why not?
The defense needs, if that's going to happen, the defense needs an expert, because in real life, when stuff like that happens, everything's sped up, right? And, you know, in all these police officer shootings that we see now, Vinny, there's experts out there that talk about, you know, how fast things happen, perception reaction. Everybody knows, you know, perception reaction, it, you know, takes time to even react to something you see. So when you slow it down, it makes it look like there's more time to make decisions than there really is. So if I was the defense attorney, I'd have to have an expert to, you know, I'd want it sped up, because that's the way it happens when you're in the middle.
That's interesting to actually speed it up. All right, folks. So all my guests are here tonight, and they know what we're going to do next. We let them know ahead of time, because it's not a comfortable thing to talk about when you're a lawyer still practicing. See, I don't go in a courtroom anymore, so I can talk about race and what lawyers have told me when they're not in a courtroom, right? Because I don't have to go into any more courtrooms to practice, but these lawyers have to. But we're going to try to have a very frank and honest discussion about the impact of race in jury selection. And for you tonight specifically, I have a 13th juror question. Is race the most important factor when picking a jury in this case? Go to our Facebook page, Court TV, or Vinny Politan Court TV. Let us know yes or no, and buckle your seatbelts, folks. We're going where no lawyer likes to go next.
911, what is the emergency? I'm at the Circle Food Store, and someone just got shot.
What happens if I told you that I looked at the video and then he actually takes a step back? I would disagree.
All of America is watching Clearwater, Florida.
Now!
What does the jury need to find the truth?
He had to shoot to defend himself. Those are the facts, and that's the law.
He could have walked away. Instead, he took a person's life.
At about 3:30, Pinellas County Sheriff's Office responded to the Circle A convenience store. Marquise McLaughlin had arrived at the store with his girlfriend, Brittany Jacobs. Brittany parked their car in a handicapped spot. Marquise and his son, who's 5 years old, went into the store. Michael Drejka, white male, arrived at the store. He lives in the area and was a frequent customer of the store. And he had an issue with people who illegally parked in handicapped spots. And he was complaining about her parking in the handicapped spot. At that point, Marquise McLaughlin was in the store, learned of the disturbance in the parking lot, that McLaughlin approached Drejka. He didn't waste any time getting to him, and he pushed him with great force. I mean, this is a violent push. This wasn't a shove. This wasn't just a tap. His hands, and he slammed him to the ground. When Drejka had been slammed to the ground, he reaches and takes out his firearm. Drejka fires one round, and it strikes McLaughlin right here in the chest. McLaughlin then grabs his chest and retreats back into the store.
911, what's the address of
I need help now!
Where he collapses. EMS responded. He was taken to Morton Plant Hospital, where he was pronounced dead.
Not justice! No peace!
It's still ludicrous how you can claim that you're in fear of your life, but yet you approach and start the confrontation.
I don't make the law, and I do not do what people want because of outrage.
They both were allowed to go home and sleep in their bed that night after killing unarmed black men.
If you don't like it, and you don't like the fact he's not sitting in jail, go talk to the legislature.
At least have the audacity to say that we as a legislature are going to speak to this obvious miscarriage of justice.
Day one of jury selection for Florida versus Michael Drejka. And yes, folks, we're going to talk about race right now. And there are some folks watching right now like, Vinny, why are you doing that? Why are you making this about race? This isn't about race. Well, the reason I'm talking about it is because I can't avoid the obvious in trying to analyze a trial that we are covering here on Court TV. Now, you can put your blinders on and say race has nothing to do with this. Now, what am I talking about here? Am I talking about Michael Drejka's mind? No, I'm not inside Michael Drejka's mind. I have no reason why. I have no understanding as to why he shot and fired that weapon. That's what this trial is about. But if you don't think race is one of the threads running through all of this, with a defendant who is white, a victim who is black, Black Lives Matter protesting this case, wondering why there was no arrest after 25 days, and talking about stand your ground and the way it impacts the African-American community versus other communities and what they think about it. If you don't think it's part of this case, then you've got blinders on, because it is. Now, is it all about race? Obviously, no. But now we're in jury selection. And it's time to take a look at who is going to ultimately judge Michael Drejka here. What is that jury going to look like? And is race the most important factor? Is it a factor at all? That's what we're going to debate and discuss right now with my think tank. And let me reintroduce who is with me tonight. Down in Clearwater, Bridget Domingos, criminal defense attorney. We've got all criminal defense attorneys. Noah Pines, Michael Bixon, and Michael Sterling, all here. And I've told you all, just verify, I've told you all ahead of time we're going to talk about this. And I know it's a little uncomfortable because you all have to still practice in courtrooms across this country, but I don't, okay? Let's start here. Have you heard of a Batson challenge, right? So when it's time for peremptory challenge, right, and you can boot people off a jury, you can boot them off for any reason or no reason at all, unless the reason you're bouncing them off is because of the race, ethnicity, or gender of that person, okay? So a Batson challenge is the other side is kicking off someone, and I think they're kicking them off because of the color of their skin. I make a Batson challenge. I challenge your right to get rid of that juror. And the way it pops its head up in the middle of the trial is usually based upon race. One side or the other thinks that maybe too many black jurors are being booted off, and you have a suspicion that it's because of the color of their skin, so you make a Batson challenge. Or perhaps it's the other way around. Maybe you think that one of the attorneys is bouncing off jurors just because they're all white, and you make a Batson challenge. It's part of the process because you're not allowed to get rid of a juror because of the color of their skin. Yet, somehow, some way, I think lawyers do that, folks. I think they do. Let me bring in, first, just go around the horn here. Round the horn. And I'll start with you, Bridget. It's a simple yes-no question. Do you think that lawyers exclude jurors based on the color of their skin?
I do.
Noah?
I don't. I mean, I don't personally.
You don't personally, but do you think lawyers do?
Definitely. In the last couple cases I've tried, I've seen prosecutors categorically get rid of a group of jurors that
all the time.
Yes.
Okay, so it's an issue, okay? That's one of the reasons we're talking about it tonight, folks. All right, let's start here. And I want to go back historically. When we really, I think for me, when I really started thinking about this issue, I'm a young lawyer, I'm practicing cases, and there's a case in Florida, not in Florida, in California, involving Rodney King, right? You remember Rodney King on video was beaten by some Los Angeles police officers. Well, let's take a look at what that, we'll take a look at what that jury is all about. We got it? Let's show the folks at home. Do we have it? Oh, okay. All right. You remember the case, right? Rodney King, it's caught on video. Well, the verdict there was not guilty for the 4 LAPD police officers in the trial. That jury, 10 members of that jury were white, 1 was Asian, 1 was Hispanic. Again, the verdict, not guilty. And a lot of people looked at that and said, this is outrageous, this is a verdict based on race. Well, then there was another case in California after that, involving a former football player named O.J. Simpson. Remember that case? Well, that case is in California. That jury had 2 white jurors, 9 black jurors, 1 Hispanic. And that, too, was a not guilty. And there was another reaction from the public that, oh, my goodness, was that all about race? So let me start with those first 2 cases. Were those 2 cases about race?
Yeah, they certainly had racial overtones and undertones to both of the cases. They had a lot to do with race, particularly in Los Angeles at that time. You saw the Rodney King verdict led to massive riots in Los Angeles, which demonstrably was about police brutality that had gone, undetected. And for the first time, it was caught on video. And this was before there were cell phone cameras. This was before everything was caught on video. This was at a time where police were getting away routinely and systematically with oppressing people of color and doing these sorts of beatings regularly. And for the first time, it was caught on camera. And for the first time, the community thought there would be accountability, and there were none. And then you saw...
Was it because of the color of the skin of the jury?
I don't think so. I mean, and look, and that's a very hard position to take, right? But I honestly believe there's so many factors that go into a trial. The prosecutors, the defense. I mean, look, God, OJ had a fantastic defense team. Was it the jurors? Was the defense team? Was it the state? Was it the judge's rulings? I mean, there's so many factors that go into something like this, Yeah, I mean, he did have a predominantly African-American makeup of the jurors. But was that what actually caused it? I don't think so. I think he was a great defense team.
And your thoughts with Rodney King and O.J. Simpson, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think race was a factor with the jury, but it's not, it's not the color of the skin, Vinny, that really is the issue. A lot of times, different jurors bring in different perspectives. So, an all-white jury may have a different perspective than an African-American jury. So it's not that one part is racist or another. It's you're coming from, kind of like Michael said, you're coming from, you're a bunch of oppressed people because the police are doing these things dirty in your community. You know it, you can't prove it. Now you can prove it, right? Body cams, cell phone cams. You're catching police officers who are stepping over the line, so there's more accountability.
Let me ask you, Bridget, those two cases, right? O.J. Simpson, predominantly black jury, he's not guilty. The LAPD officers, predominantly white jury, and they were found not guilty. Was it all about, and I'm saying you don't have to be, these jurors aren't racist, it's just, but was race a factor in the way they saw the case and ultimately impacting the verdict in those cases?
Well, I'm sure race played a factor in both of those cases to some extent, if we're being honest, Vinny. But I will say this, if we're talking about the O.J. case, I think it was clearly a case where the defense outperformed the state in that instance. And so I think with O.J., even though he's black, he was an icon to many. He kind of, wasn't the oppressed person in which you're normally thinking about when you think about the black males in which, are being, mistreated by law enforcement and things like that. No one at that time was mistreating OJ, or that wasn't an issue. So I think if we're talking about the Rodney King trial, though, I think it was just astounding that this could happen and nothing happened, which is why the riots and everything probably occurred at that time. I think that one was definitely much more racially motivated, if in my opinion, than the OJ case at that time.
Michael, you think we would have had different results if we had an all-white jury for O.J. Simpson and an all-black jury in the Rodney King case?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason that Batson versus Kentucky exists. And even recently, the Supreme Court came down in Flowers versus State of Mississippi, where it talked about not only Batson challenges in specific cases, but it talked about a pattern of excluding black jurors systematically throughout multiple cases. So you had a $100,000 study that was put together by a nonprofit that demonstrated that a percentage of the county was black, but there were rarely ever were prosecutors selecting black jurors. So you see a systematic exclusion of black jurors in specific cases, and then you sometimes see vice versa. Sometimes reverse Batson challenges get granted as well. But race plays a factor. It plays a factor in the diversity. It plays a factor in how folks think culturally. It plays a factor in life experiences. That's why if you want to get the best juror, you want to have a diverse juror that brings different life experiences, that thinks about things differently, that has different points of views. And if you want a monolithic juror, you try to get one that doesn't have that sort of diverse thinking.
And that's exactly why we're talking about it tonight, folks. And in this case, race clearly a factor in how we got to where we are right now. Our 13th juror question, though, is race the most important factor when picking a jury in this case? That's a very specific question. Looking for your answers and your comments on our Facebook page, Court TV, or Vinny Politan, Court TV. This discussion just beginning.
They both were allowed to go home and sleep in their bed that night after killing unarmed black men. It's still ludicrous how you can claim that you're in fear of your life, but yet you approach and start the confrontation.
That was attorney Ben Crump. He's the attorney for Marquise McLaughlin's girlfriend and mother of his children, comparing the Michael Drejka case to George Zimmerman. And, you know, there are a lot of similarities. There are some differences. The big difference is we have witnesses and a videotape here, but some of the way the case progressed and the way people saw it, very similar. Again, self-defense is the defense in both of those cases. We're talking about now the issue of race and how it impacts juries. Speaking of the George Zimmerman case, let's take a look at the makeup of that jury, right? George Zimmerman, who is Hispanic, half white, his parents mixed, but his jury, 5 whites, 1 Hispanic, all women, and he was found not guilty in Central Florida, up there in Seminole County. Actually, the case wasn't tried in Seminole County, but your thoughts about that case compared to this one in terms of the impact of the jury being white and Hispanic, like George Zimmerman, white and Hispanic?
Look, I think, as my colleague Michael mentioned earlier, you know, cases are tried between the lines. And the prosecution, I watched that case. I was a federal prosecutor at the time, and I was watching that case, paying very close attention to it, and the prosecutors were just really, really bad.
Okay, so you didn't see so much of it as a race factor.
I completely agree with
They
you.
were really,
The state completely messed that case up. I mean, there's no question in my mind that the outcome of that case was dictated by how badly the state performed.
They kept trying to predict what the defense attorneys were going to do.
They were more defensive than offensive.
Rather than trying their case, they kept trying to try the case around what they thought the defense attorneys might do, and it just, I mean, they really bumbled that case. It was terrible.
Bridget, your thoughts about the Zimmerman verdict and the fact that the jury there, again, it was 6 jurors like we're going to have here in this case, 5 white, 1 Hispanic.
And what's your question, Vinny? You're asking
My question
about
is,
how do I think that affects the jury here in Pinellas?
No. Did you think that in the George Zimmerman case that it was the color of the skin of the jurors that impacted that verdict at all? The way they saw the case?
I'm sure that played a part in it, especially since, in my opinion, Trayvon Martin was kind of vilified somewhat in the media, you know, seen as, you know, he was not seen as a kid. He was kept being considered a man and things of that nature, whereas I believe he wasn't given any benefit of the doubt, so to speak. And so I think that made it easier for someone to think Zimmerman could have been justified in the way he handled things, which I clearly believe he was not.
Now, when I was a young attorney and I had a case that was just a simple drug possession, four guys in a car, the drugs are found in the car, no one has it on their person. But all 4 get charged. 2 of them absconded, so I have to try 2 of them at trial. And I'm practicing in Bergen County, New Jersey, 90% white, okay? About 5% black. The defendants are, one's black, one's Hispanic. So I picked my jury, this is probably like the 3rd trial I ever tried. I picked my jury, and one of the other attorneys from the prosecutor's office comes up to me afterwards, because she came into the courtroom, knows nothing about my case, only came in and saw my jury. And my jury was very diverse. It was very, I mean, especially for Bergen County, extremely diverse. And my reasoning was I had no race-neutral reason to get rid of those jurors who ended up on that jury, right? And she comes to me and she says, it's not guilty. You got no chance of winning this case. I said, what do you mean? You don't even know the evidence. She said, no, you got no case. Look at your jury, right? You've got who the defendants and what the jury looks like. It's going to be not guilty. She was right. They walked. They absolutely walked. Now, it might be because I was a young prosecutor, no idea what I'm doing. But she knew, without even knowing the evidence in the case or ever watching me try a case, and that made an impression on me, that race matters, but it's not supposed to matter, right?
I mean, look.
Can you predict a verdict when sometimes we look at a jury?
No, you cannot. Absolutely not. But to the extent that race plays a factor, it's really about life experiences. It's about, you know, as a young black man, I've shivered when a police officer has pulled me over, and my hands have shivered, and I've quivered at the thought that I could be the next victim, or I've been racially profiled before, and so I understand what that's like. So it's about my life experiences. I may be able to have empathy for someone who's had a similar experience. So it's not just about the fact that I'm a black man, it's about the fact that I have an experience that that is relevant to the case itself. And so it's not just about the fact that I'm black, but it's about the fact that my life experiences are different. So when you're questioning jurors, you want to know about their life experiences. You want to know about their friends, their family, people who, what they've gone through in their lives. And so I think you cannot predict a juror. I tried a case, similar to your experience. I tried a case in rural Mississippi in Rankin County. I had an all-white juror, mostly women. A black man was accused of assaulting a white woman, and I was walking out of the case, and the DA's office were high-fiving each other when they picked a juror like it was over, and we ultimately end up winning that case.
Really?
Because the case
that's great to hear, because I want to go through a couple of cases that are more recent, okay? Because that's a recent case you're talking about,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got a case in Chicago. Jason Van Dyke is a police officer. There was a videotape of this one. You may recognize this video. Laquan McDonald is a young man who is walking in the street here, gets shot in the street on video. And in that case, you had 7 whites, 1 Asian, 3 Hispanic, 1 black, and the verdict there was guilty, okay? So Laquan McDonald was the victim in that case, but a white police officer found guilty. Now, these ones are police officers just because these are the ones that recently have happened. I'm not picking on police tonight. Another one in Texas involving an officer named Roy D. Oliver, the victim, a black teenager in Texas. 7 white jurors, 3 Hispanic, 2 black. He, too, found guilty. This was a teenager who was on his way back from a party with some friends and was shot and killed. One other one, this one in South Carolina, another one that had a video with it. Walter Scott is the victim, but the defendant was Michael Slager, police officer, white. The jury, 11 white, 1 black. Now, this jury was deadlocked, but they were deadlocked 10-2 for conviction. And this is the one with the famous video where the victim, Walter Scott, is walking away from the police officer. He was ultimately convicted in federal court. So, based upon Michael Sterling, your conclusion in your case and some of these more recent ones that we're looking at, are things getting a little less, more colorblind? Maybe is the word I'm looking for. Maybe are we reaching a point now where people are like, okay, let's look at just the facts and not worry about the color of everybody's skin?
I think it really, exactly like Michael was saying earlier, it comes down to the life experiences. And I think that's a really critical part of picking a jury, right? If you pick an all-white jury, an all-black jury, just based solely on the color of their skin, you are doing your client a disservice. I mean, forget the ethical implications of it. You are doing your client a disservice because you're not paying attention to who they actually are as a person, right? I mean, they could vote wildly away in terms of your favor, just because they hate your client or because of how they were raised, and you didn't really explore all those avenues.
And does what we were talking about before, all these videotapes and the high-profile nature of a lot of these cases now, is it changing perhaps the perception or sensitivities of potential jurors out there, Noah?
Well, I think it is because they're seeing it more often, right? So they're becoming desensitized to these videos and people getting shot. In this case, Michael Drejka, he would have shot anybody. He would have shot a black guy, he would have shot a white guy, he would have shot a Hispanic guy, he would have shot an Asian guy. Anybody who pushed him, he would have shot. No question about that.
Okay, so let's now get to the ultimate issue for this case. And I'll start with you, Bridget. I always start ladies first. Is race the most important factor in the selection of this jury for this case?
And you know what, Vinny, I think it's definitely, one of the most important factors, but I think people's views on guns in general is going to play a big factor, as well as race. But I think here in Pinellas County, I'm listening to some of the dialogue between you and the others on the panel, and when one of them said a minute ago, like an all-black jury wouldn't be a thing, or wouldn't be helpful to a client, I don't think I've ever even seen that possibility in my jury selections here in Pinellas County, if we're being honest. The makeup of those juries typically are more middle-aged, Caucasian, and that's typically what I'm dealing with whenever I pick a jury, and I've had more juries here than I can count. But I will tell you this, though. I think race is definitely going to play a factor. It's already played a factor. If we're just the fact that Michael Drejka is free to go back and forth, go to the bathroom when he wants to, come to this courtroom when when he's summoned to be here, all of that's already, I believe, race at some point played a factor in the fact that his bond was only $100,000 when bonds here typically are much higher. I have a lot of Black and brown clients in jail currently whose bonds are, twice and quadruple that amount for doing less. And so again, I think that race has already kind of played a factor in kind of giving him more of a benefit of the doubt that others don't typically receive.
All right, let me go down the line here. Noah?
Race is not the most important factor. In this case, it would be, I would go for people who own guns, who use guns for self-defense. That's issue number one. Two is age, right? You've got an older guy who gets pushed by a younger guy. I would want an older jury in this case to say, hey, why is this guy starting the violence? Why is this 28-year-old guy, he started, he pushed him, he kind of gets what he deserves. After that comes race.
Michael Bixon?
I think it comes down to self-defense is one of the biggest issues that they're going to deal with. The life experiences of the jurors, I think whether or not they're actually willing to listen, you're going to get very few people who are just going to say, I'm not fair and impartial, but I think it's important to listen how they actually answer the questions. And, overall, at the end of the day, I don't think that race is going to be the biggest factor.
That's a no. It's a no. You can say no.
I know, it's a no. It's a hard no.
Sterling.
No, race is not the most important factor. One of the things I always do, Vinny, is I always pull the demographics of the county where I'm trying to case. I mean, in Pinellas County, it's only 10% African American. So you cannot make race the biggest factor because if that becomes the biggest factor, you're not going to win. Moreover, what you want to do is you want to also make sure you highlight what actually happened in this case because McLaughlin was really the person who was defending someone. He was defending his fiance, his wife, his girlfriend, Brittany, from somebody who had a gun who was yelling, at her. He came up, he defends her. And so you've got this defense that turns into self-defense. So you've got, you want to have jurors who are going to be sympathetic to the fact that someone would want to defend their woman,
Their loved one and their family
who's
and
in
their
the car
kids.
with kids, right?
Good stuff. Thanks for being honest. You're always honest, but I put him on the spot tonight. I appreciate that. Our 13th juror question, why don't you be honest with me as well? Is race the most important factor when picking a jury in this case? You can vote yes or no. I'm not telling you what to vote. Yes or no, go onto our Court TV Facebook page or Vinnie Politan, Court TV.
911, what is the emergency? I'm at the Circle Food Store and someone just got shot.
The facts of this case can lead reasonable people to different determinations.
One thing you should know about this trial, very similar to the George Zimmerman case.
Marquise McLaughlin was a father. He was shot down in front of his child over a parking spot.
Michael Drejka appointing himself as the handicap parking police.
He is a dangerous man.
He shoves you to the ground. I'm on the ground like this. Okay.
As I come out like this, he's taking his step.
Okay. Was he charging after you?
2 steps running.
What happens if I told you that I looked at the video and in no time or point does he come running up towards you? He actually takes a step back.
I would disagree.
What did Drejka see? What did Drejka know?
When the jury looks at the video, no one's going to say it was unreasonable for him to have fired.
Drejka's history in uttering racial slurs will not be allowed in the courtroom.
All of America is watching Clearwater, Florida.
What does the jury need to find the truth?
He had to shoot to defend himself.
Should never have been prosecuted.
This is not right at all.
Those are the facts, and that's the law.
In his mind, he was defending himself. He could have walked away. Instead, he took a person's life.
It's day one of jury selection in the case against Michael Drejka, and like any case, there are two sides to every case. The side that Michael Drejka has taken is pretty evident from his police interview. So let's take a look at that police interview to understand what this was all about from Michael Drejka's perspective.
So you draw your weapon. Talk to me about that.
Well, the way I was able to draw it, I couldn't level it with one hand, so I had to eventually try and bring my left around for support.
Okay.
And he made his step towards me, and that was that.
How many steps did he make towards you?
Just one step.
Okay. And then that was that. Talk to me about that. What do you do from there?
I made sure there's no other threat around him because it spun him a little bit, and he ran into the store. Immediate threat gone. I did have her as a potential.
No, I mean beforehand, before you fired the gun.
Ask me the question.
Before you fired the gun.
Yes.
Once you pull the gun out.
Yes.
Okay.
You said he stepped towards you?
Yeah.
Because I don't know
one more step. Right, he made one more step towards me.
And then what do you do?
I didn't say a word. Gun was already out.
Okay, what do you do?
Fire my weapon.
How many times do you fire the weapon?
One time, sir.
Okay. So you fire the weapon and then basically just scan?
I ended up standing up, made sure all the threats were clear, reholstered my weapon.
Okay. All right. So he didn't come back at you again or anything like
Not
that?
after he left.
Where did he go?
Into the store.
Okay. Did you strike him?
No.
No, I mean with a gun.
No. I don't know. Okay. I assume so, yes, because there was an ambulance there.
Okay. So you don't know if you hit him?
I know nothing, but I would assume so.
Okay. All right. So what do you do? Talk to me from there after you reholster your weapon.
After I reholster my weapon, everything's clear. Somebody screaming about hurt kids. Somebody screaming about hurt kids. Somebody thought they were in the car. So I said everybody's inside, you know, see if you can get her to unlock the car. You know, and that was it. All I remember is screaming about kids.
Okay. What do you do from after you hear somebody talking about our kids and stuff?
Everything's all, well, I asked one person to go, you know, see if she could unlock her car from the inside, and then I decided to extricate myself from the situation completely and just back to my vehicle and wait for you. So I took my firearm out, unloaded it, locked it, left it in the car. And
What do you mean you locked it back?
Yes.
Okay.
Unloaded it, locked it back, waited for you.
Okay. Did you unload a bag or anything like that? Or?
No, God, no. Just the one that was in the pipe.
Okay. So where did you store the weapon at? Inside the vehicle?
Oh, it was in my holster.
Okay. Where did you put the gun at though?
Right on top of the center console.
Okay, on top of the center console. What do you do from there?
Wait for you.
Okay. Do you make any statements to anybody?
Negative.
Okay, on the parking lot?
Other than telling people it's probably not a good idea to be in here right now.
Okay.
Customers pulling in now. I spoke to no one else.
Okay. All right.
Well, I did inquire if he had his cameras on because I know he's got 9 cameras in that place.
You inquired to who?
The clerk through the door.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he was on the phone with someone.
Okay, so did you make contact with him? You walked up to the store and make contact?
I walked up to the store through the door.
Okay.
You know, and he nodded yes. And
okay.
That was the end of that because I really want somebody to look at those tapes. It should have everything.
Okay. I'm sure they do. So after all this happens, deputies show up, I'm assuming?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Talk to me about that. What happens from there?
Procedure, deputy, you know, identified me. I identified myself.
Okay.
And from there, it was straightforward. Me on the ground, handcuffs.
Okay. All right. Did you have contact with deputies here or detectives when they brought you here?
One said they came in, got some quick information, and asked me if I needed any water, and I haven't
Okay.
seen anybody since.
All right. Did you talk to? I think they read your rights and stuff like that.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you've been advised of your rights.
Yes.
Okay. We're gonna kind of slow it down a little bit and kind of, because I'm gonna be asking specific questions about the incident. And again, just like you were, just be truthful with me. And just because we got to kind of dot our I's and cross our T's, exactly what happened. I know you kind of went through it a little fast or whatever, so we're going to just go back a little bit. Is that okay?
Whatever you need
All right.
to, brother.
Appreciate it, Michael.
Okay, for those of you who followed the George Zimmerman trial, you recall there were a bunch of interviews that he did as well, and all those videos were put into evidence by the prosecution. So I'm wondering, will prosecutors put these videos in evidence in this case? The George Zimmerman case, it was a not guilty verdict, you may recall. We talked about that already. Bridget Domingos, criminal defense attorney down in Clearwater. Your thoughts, do you think the prosecution is going to use those as evidence in this case, or will they try to force the defense's hand by not putting that in and making him tell his story live on the witness stand while being cross-examined?
I think that's an interesting question, actually. I tend to think that they may introduce it just based on the trials I've already had here in this county, quite a few of them. But I think they may introduce it mainly because they want to get in that evidence of that slow motion video and that motion that they won. So I think that when I think they want to show him or kind of show some contradiction to what it is he's saying in that initial statement. Because clearly when you slow down that video, it tells a different story than the one he's wanting you to believe when he's initially talking to police. So I think they'd want to get that out in front of a jury.
Yeah, and that was kind of what, when I interviewed the prosecutors in the George Zimmerman case, I asked them, why'd you put the videos in? Why not? And they said, well, we felt this story was so incredible, like you could not believe it, that we put it out there for the jury. We thought they would think the same way we do about it. What do you think is going to happen here?
Well, the prosecutor should not put this into evidence. Whether you think it's incredible or not, you're getting out the defendant's story. And you never, as a prosecutor, want to get out the defendant's story. Make them do that. Make the defendant get on the stand, testify. If you want to cross him using the video and pick apart what his testimony is, that's what you do.
I'm inclined to agree. I think that if you're just initially presented, it presents more problems for the state than it actually helps them, right? Because it does get out a story. I think that obviously there are inconsistencies with how he talks in the video versus what the video actually shows. And I think that's great, but I think that's more an issue for cross than just bringing it out.
Yeah, I think it's 3 for 3 here, Vinny. If I'm the prosecutor in that case, I'm not letting you testify without facing my cross-examination. You want to tell your side of the story, get on the witness stand under oath. You weren't under oath when you were talking to police officers. Get on the witness stand under oath, put your hand on the Bible, tell your story, and face my cross-examination. I'm not letting you get your story out without facing my cross-examination.
Yeah. And investigators did a good job of locking him into a story, so he can't say anything different than what he said there, right?
I don't think he said anything that damaging. He did say.
Well, he said.
He said he took a step towards me, right?
Right. And well, he's 2.5 away from him.
If you slow down the video, Vinny, you'll see when he got pushed to the ground.
Pushed.
He actually did take a step or two towards him. When he pulled out the gun, he stepped backwards.
Right.
And so remember, we talked about perception reaction time. It takes a period of time for you to perceive what's going on and then react. So he did take a step forward first. Maybe not before the gun came out, but there was a step forward.
I'm going to want some jurors who've been in some street fights, who've been in some schoolyard brawls.
The defense wants that?
Yeah, I know the prosecutors.
Prosecutor
I'm
does.
going to want some jurors who've been in some street brawls, some street fights, who are going to understand that just because you get pushed or hit or punched doesn't mean you get to shoot somebody and kill them. You know what I mean? I'm going to want some jurors who know a little bit about some street fights, because a push in my day, Vinny, and I'm not that old, doesn't mean you get to pull out a gun and shoot somebody. You can push them back, you can punch them in the face, but it doesn't mean a street brawl turns into a deadly shooting and you're justified for doing so. That, to me, seems very cowardice way out.
Not just that, but he actually gets back up, and you hear him talk about that in the interview. I got back up, right? And I scanned around, I think is what he said, or something to that effect. That isn't, I mean, how much imminent danger, how much great bodily harm were you really facing when you just sort of popped back up after you shot him from a push?
Yeah. All right. Our 13th juror question, we're going to reveal those results in just a moment. So this is your last chance to get your vote in.